is again Candid Conversation with VCs, decoding the anatomy of a deal. So to help us to, in this session, we have Padmaja Ruparel, founding partner, IA Fund. Padmaja is nationally recognized as a key player in the Indian entrepreneurial ecosystem and has helped co-found many of the relevant institutions besides being an active angel investor herself. Padmaja? And next up, we have Sanjay Nath, managing partner, Bloom Ventures. Bloom has emerged as one of India's leading early stage funds, having invested in over 50 startups since its inception in 2010. Prior to Bloom, Sanjay was an active angel investor through Mumbai Angels. His angel investments include InMobi, Apps Daily, Little Eye Lab, Tonmo Imaging, and many more. Sanjay? And next up, we have Rehan Khan, managing partner, Oreos Venture Partners. He loves working closely with passionate entrepreneurs who are in the early days of building ambitious business. Rehan? And to moderate this Power Pack panel, we wanted a Power Punch lady, Chandra Rangnath Srinath, Chief of Bureau, South of India, ET Now. Chandra, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone had a good lunch and you're ready for the session. You know, before I start the session, I just want to sort of see a show of hands. So how many entrepreneurs in this room? Okay. And how many would like to become entrepreneurs? Okay, more entrepreneurs. And how many in the deep tech space? Okay, it makes my job easier because you know, this is a very broad topic, decoding the anatomy of a deal. But since it's NPC and the focus is more on deep tech and enterprise startups, we thought we will ask them to delve more into that, you know, rather than make it more generic, because I think this format would be more useful, but always open for feedback. And I am going to give a lot of time for audience questions. So I'm going to start with each one of you. Padmaja, if you know, you can just tell us what would you define as deep tech, because that's the next big thing now. Everybody is talking about it. It has a very loose definition. Agri-tech, people say it's deep tech, people say health tech. Then, you know, there are elements of AI, ML. What do you look for when a startup says they are into deep tech?
Thanks, Chandra. And you're absolutely right. There are so many definitions floating around about deep tech. It's sometimes we spend more time thinking about what deep tech is rather than getting into the venture. But one of the things that I really learned, and I heard somebody actually help me codify it in some ways, is two things, right? One is new technologies like AI, robotics, how they are being applied to new problems and innovations. So it is deep tech, but technology also for deeper problems, which probably we did not have the ability to address. And that is where also innovation comes in. And second, which I think was also very interesting for me to learn, was that there are two types of technologies that you can build on. One is open source and other is proprietary. So when you take open source technology and build a technology product, that's one part. It's not that I'm saying it's not doable, but when you're doing deep tech, you're also looking at what is the new innovative technology that you've layered it with, or you've created a proprietary around it. And I think those two really stuck in my mind as to say that there is new technologies which are getting developed for areas or sectors or problems or needs which were not identified earlier. So I think that is, that to me sounded the best definition, and it also allowed us to apply to a lot of sectors. So it's sort of become a horizontal, applying, you know, deep technologies, be it AI or ML or or robotics, all of that sort of gets then applied to a variety of sectors, as varied as agri or fintech or healthcare or educare or whatever.
Right.
So I think that to me was the best definition that I learned.
Right. And Sanjay, are you increasingly seeing a lot of startups come up in these categories? Because this has, been the buzzword in the last year with respect to a lot of .ai startups, a lot of startups defining them as edtech, agri-tech, health tech, trying to solve very complex problems using technology. Is your portfolio now skewed towards such startups? What do you look for when you get pitches from startups that want to solve very complex problems leveraging technology?
Thanks, Chandra. If we just go back a bit and look at Rehan and Padmaja on both my sides, I mean, we all actually began through angel groups and then, became VCs. In my own case, there's InMobi, Rehan has Dhruva Software. If you look at the evolution of tech also, Girish at Freshdesk talked, or he's going to talk later. For a long time, tech was associated mainly with, let's say, B2B, SaaS, and enterprise, right? And literally, when you thought of tech, you thought of B2B, SaaS, enterprise in just those sectors. If you look at our own portfolio, how it's evolved, I mean, we've got gray-orange in a sense, which is, integrated combination of embedded software meets mechanical engineering meets hardware, very complex tech in that sense. Locus, which is AI for logistics, Tricog, which is AI for healthcare. I think one of the big drivers and the shifts in this is that earlier that tech talent at the level below the founders wasn't there, right? So you would have, for example, Samay and Akash at Grey Orange who started it straight from campus, and they were robotics experts. But how do you build that depth, just below the founders? And I think that's a huge shift. If you look at our own locus, I'm sure Rehan, Padmaja also have that. We're seeing today PhDs, and this is not to say that you have to get foreign talent necessarily, but the fact is that earlier it was just tech, now it's data science, it's AI, ML, and there are courses, there are certifications in that, right? I mean, that has evolved, so I think that's a huge factor. So I think it's been quite an evolution. We have one of our sister funds in the Valley that calls it hard tech, right? In fact, they do B2B, but only hard tech, like only nano, autonomous cars. So within deep tech also there are subsectors. I think that India is still a little early for really deep tech, because you've got to obviously have a market that you go after. But I think there's been a big sea change in evolution, and I think the talent that is available today for these ideas has changed. And I think today entrepreneurs also want to start those kinds of companies. I mean, I know there was a stat a couple of years ago, Investment Bank had done a sort of study that 80% of the internet dollars, Rehan's and Ola, we were in taxi for sure, 80% of the internet dollars went into consumer, right? And only went into consumer tech. I think now with the likes of Freshdesk, InMobi, Dhruva, and Grey Orange, we're seeing a lot of interest in tech, which is also important. You also need these companies to break out so that investors also,
No, in fact, I'm just going to come to that. I mean, Rehan, at the end of the day, will consumer-facing startups still get a lion's share of the money? Because even from a VC point of view, in terms of your own fund economics, the amount of, money you need to invest, the scale comes in with respect to consumer-facing startups. It's not the same, when you look at non-consumer-facing startups, be it enterprise startups or deep tech startups. The cycles are much longer. The go-to-market time is much longer. So will it always continue to be a small part of your portfolio, a nice to have, portion to say that, I'm a VC and I do deep tech, but not the major chunk? Or is that changing?
Well, so yes, compared to $4 billion valuations and $5 billion valuations, surely $1 billion valuation looks meager. But there certainly is a potential to create many billion-dollar companies in the software space. And see, the characteristics of the two companies, Chandra, are a little different. So a VC fund will often try to balance the two. Of course, you'll have funds which are more sort of specialized in one area, like Sanjay was saying, but there are also funds which will balance the two, because the software product startups, they tend to have less mortality. They're sort of more steady, And you can typically, even at a Series A, Series B, if the company is not scaling because they have a bunch of customers, you can typically get an exit. So your downside is fairly protected on that. I agree with you that the upside may not be as phenomenal as that. I mean, take my own case. I'd invested in Dhruva in 2008. It's a $1 billion company now. But I'd invested in Ola in 2011. It's a $7 billion company now, right? So yes, I agree with you, but that's not to say that software product startups are not phenomenal. I think when Dhruva IPOs, it'll be a phenomenal IPO for India. They have close to 100 patents. You'll hear from Jaspreet later today. Or when Girish takes fresh desk ahead, it'll be amazing. So I think both have a lot of merit. If you're sort of asking to choose between the two, I think both have merit.
Right. And Padmaja, in terms of the role that, VCs or even early stage investors have to play, I mean, should it be very different? Should they be more involved when it comes to non-consumer startups in terms of the differentiation that you bring beyond money? Because you have to handhold these, startups through the first phase at least, because they are, testing something perhaps that hasn't been done before. It might be a very unique concept. What role does the investor play then beyond writing a check?
No, I think you've almost hit the nail with that question because, when we see a lot of deep tech, so-called deep tech product startups, right? I think one of the big challenges that we have to scrape through is the fact that the technology sometimes is very good. Many times, I would say, not sometimes. Many times the technology side is very well built. But how does the business come in? At the end of the day, the investor is investing in a business, not in the technology. The technology is not going to make money. It is the monetization of that technology that's going to make money.
So you think there's a disconnect between technology and monetization?
Yes, there is at times a disconnect. The business side of the team is sometimes not even there. And I think that is where investors, especially angels, and I think even early stage, seed stage, VCs like ourselves, we need to put in the time to actually handhold, strategize. How do you build a business? Who do we get into the team? How do you go and access customers? And then go to the next level as well to say, yes, you're selling the product, but how do you create stickiness with your existing customers by perhaps surrounding it with a service portfolio? So you're right. I think as Rehan said and as Sanjay said, product space is growing. It didn't exist before Dhruva. When IN invested in Dhruva in 2008, there was really not very many product companies at that time. Today, the world is a different place here in this country. But it still has that bridge from technology to venture, technology just from an IP to a monetized business with a top line and a bottom line. That is still a bridge that has to be crossed. And I think their investors have to play that role. And therefore, VCs are not playing just the role on angels. Of course they don't, but even VCs don't play the role of just writing a check and sitting back. I think there is an investment of time, networks, everything to really build that company. You are a co-owner in some ways. And you're sort of helping that technology see the light of day and build a business. So I think even in Dhruva, that happened, honestly. There was that hand-holding when they were very young, when they took the raised the angel round. I mean, their whole online customer acquisition was not there, to be honest. The whole idea of saying that there's a US strategy and not an India GTM, that was sort of brainstormed with the investors, with the angels, with Rehan and all of them. So the point I'm trying to make that these companies do need hand-holding. And investors, therefore, when they invest, they do look for mentorability in the team. There has to be a recognition what you know and what you don't know in some ways, and to be able to accept that mentoring, because otherwise it's not going to happen. That's the reality. And the second thing I think, which is also very important from the investor's perspective, that they need to be ready to be able to invest that time. So I think that is very important.
Is that there today? Do they have dedicated partners who will?
Yeah. I think in many funds, angels of course put in time. I mean, angel investing, the very concept means that, right? That they're investing money and they're also quote unquote angelic in trying to mentor and help the company grow and open up the networks and all the good things, all the non-financial which are called investment. But I think VCs are now creating models like that. In our own fund in IAN, we do have partners, but we now have a group of mentors who are helping companies grow them. We have expert panels who are saying, who do you connect with? How do you diligence? How do you, work with larger companies? And how do you create bridges and business models which will allow you to not only do business in India, but they have to be able to now quickly start doing parallel business overseas in the US or wherever. So that mentoring and those operating partners become very important.
Sanjay, have you passed over a deck or a pitch that had, say, great tech, but not so great monetization, or they didn't have a business plan? Or would you then still give them money because you would then come in and tell them how to make money out of it? I mean, what is more important here? Just trying to understand the psychology of an investor in such situations.
Sure.
Say it's a great tech, with a great team. I mean, does it matter if they still don't have the path in their minds on how they're going to go about the business side of it? Will that be the case where the VC comes?
Padmaja made some great points. I'm going to amplify that also and just respond to that. B2B, or let's say deep tech or tech, is very different from consumer in the sense that, let's say there's a the Uber or whatever, let's say the next Oyo or the Uber. Rather than a deck, they have an app that we can all come and look at, right? It's very easy to kind of look at the app, look at the MAUs, DAUs, and the downloads. When you look at tech, I'd say generally, I think it requires specialized skill, right? It requires domain skill. I mean, you're talking about there are sub-domains within that. There is life sciences and, let's say, biotech. Then you've got nanotech, you've got agri-tech. So within tech also, there's sub-specializations. In fact, you've got some funds doing that also in India. So let's take an example.
You have like a Pi Ventures which focuses on AI startups.
That's right. And then you've got Omnivore, which looks only at agri-tech, for example. But let's look at our own case of gray orange, right? I love to talk about case examples. So one advantage when you're an angel or when you're really early, how Rehan and I started, and of course Padmaja, is that you can really back, for lack of a better analogy, cool founders doing cool stuff, right? And what I mean by that is when you don't have a large fund and you don't have to put it through the fund modeling, you're backing founders who are passionate and you're backing them with your passion. So if you look at Grey Orange, for example, it would be a very interesting case study if we had to model it again from an $80 million fund, right? And if they'd come to us today. We backed a fantastic team. I mean, this team had built India's first humanoid robot. I was lucky that I was in the BitSpark Angels committee, right? I wasn't brilliant, I was just happy. I was just lucky that I went to the same alum of BITS in that sense. And their model, so they built India's first humanoid robot, a great team. They were incubated by BITS, by the Center for Entrepreneurship Learning. But their first model was robotics kits for students, right? They were assembling kits. Now, if you think about it, if you had backed a team and if you had really modeled it out, we probably wouldn't have done it. I think having said that, so what was common? The team was the same. They were deep domain experts in robotics. But I think finding the use case, like Padmaja was talking about, is really critical. So for example, today you heard a lot about in China or in East Asia, you have a lot of these cool robots that will move around and bring a juice or bring your breakfast to you. Now, that's interesting, but can it monetize and can it scale? So I think for them, they pivoted and they finally found that massive use case of warehousing, right? And not only warehousing in India, but outside. But here, if your warehouse has 1 million square feet of space, in the US, for example, they have 10 million, right? It's massively more scalable.
Right.
Each installation is a couple of $1 million. So I think you've got to help them, but also let them find a way and find those use cases. So product market fit and finding the right customer is extremely important because the same team and the same technology, is it a nice to have versus a must have? That's one.
Right.
The other thing I wanted to add is even the way we diligence these deep tech companies has changed, because I agree with Padmaja in the sense that, within Bloom, I look a little more at the deep tech cross-border side, but I'm not a domain expert. So we've actually built out an advisory team of for example, Samay and Akash, who better than your existing portfolio companies? Like, if Rehan was going to look at the next sort of Uber or anything, you'd go to Bhavish, right? Who better than your existing portfolio founders to be experts in those areas? for cloud computing, Vijay of Minja that was acquired by Nutanix is our resident expert.
So some of your existing portfolio companies help you with diligence for...
Yeah, of course. And you send it out to your customers who are, friends of the VC. The Draper Venture Network, we're part of that. They have some funds that only do deep tech.
Right.
So I think the way you diligence a tech company is not looking at just a deck, but sending it out and actually helping entrepreneurs. I mean, our culture is, even before we cut a term sheet, we like to make those introductions, help them. If Bloom invests, great. If not, we're still helping the company in some way. Yeah.
Right. Rehan, the way we've seen the Indian ecosystem at least evolve in the last few years, it's been all about big money, scale. But in terms of, the investor mindset, are they okay with some startups that have lumpy sales cycles, that, cannot deliver outsized returns, where you have to be very patient and where their run rate, may stagnate beyond a point. So they might get from 0 to 10 million, but 10 to 50 million could be challenging. So, do investors have the mindset to, stay invested in these startups, add value, stick with them through the lumpy times or the tough times?
So Chandra, I think different strokes for different folks. Like for example, to your previous question about investing, yeah, we invest before there's product market fit. We invest, we invest on a great team and we invest on great technology. You know why? Because these guys our thing is they'll figure it out. Right?
They'll figure it out.
They'll figure it out. And that has more or less worked for us, right? And we've also seen that even the guys who you think have a product market fit, they most of the time end up pivoting, right? So if you like the team and we think the technology or the product is good, we invest. Then phir dekhenge kya hoega, And that has worked very well for us. And similarly, to now coming to what you asked, is we have a similar philosophy. We stick it out, right? So we stick it out. I'm there 10 years later in Dhruva, right? We stuck it out. I think almost everybody who invested along with me, I think a lot of them all sold out. And we saw all the cycles, the lumpiness, etc. See, there is no hole-in-one strategy over here, right? I have to play the course. And the course has a lot of challenges while you're playing it, right? Even in Ola and all these companies, we've seen so many downs, right? Only the ups come out in the paper. I think
we cover the downs of Ola also.
Yeah, but what you don't know, for example, is that Ola almost died, 2-3 times in its initial years because nobody wanted to fund this business model. People in Bombay used to tell me, "Yaar, ye kya bekar company? I can wave my arm and get a cab," So nobody wanted to fund it when we sort of took it around. So I think you have to. I think you have to persevere. You have to stick it out, and that's when you have real value creation that takes place. Similarly, if you want that alpha in investing, you have to take that risk, invest in the idea and the person before, invest in the Hussein before the Hussein is discovered, right? So to speak, because afterwards it's just a Hussein and the price is very high.
Can I just add just 2 minutes? Just 2 minutes on that.
Yeah.
Just a company like Grey Orange, right? Which is, let's say, our Ola, like for or 9 of 10 people ask us if we've exited. Not only have we not exited, we've kept on investing. We've invested more, right, to that point. The other thing a lot of the people in the audience may not know is, in one sense, it's a 12-year life cycle. Many of our funds are structured as 10 plus 1 plus 1 funds. Even then, we are constrained. If you ask the three of us, you have some funds, large funds in the Valley and the US that have perpetual capital. The reason the word exit comes up is because we have to exit. But if you ask us, and if we could have perpetual capital, we wouldn't want the founders to exit. You'd want to build really, really long-term companies, 10, 20 years. The reason VCs have to exit is because we're structured like that. And if that model itself changes, we're not looking for an exit. We actually want to be partners with the companies building really long-term companies.
Absolutely. And I think there are 2 points. One is to both Sanjay and what Rehan are saying. Rehan is an investor in Dhruva not because he invested as an individual. Therefore, he can continue. To your point, Sanjay. And we've had good companies where we've had to exit, right? So I think the world is changing in India, I must say that. We did not see the product companies. We did not see high technology companies, forget deep technology, companies in India 5, 6, 7 years ago. And it is really changing. I think very rarely did I see a deck, and we get 11, 12,000 business plans a year. very rarely did I see a business plan where the team had a PhD or patent. Today we are seeing many more of them.
You're seeing
So
many more of them.
many more of them. So, which is also saying that talent of a different nature, of a different quality, and even PhDs, which we thought were not risk takers, are taking the risk of starting up. And I think this is a great thing to happen because the quality of talent, the quality of team, the quality of innovation, the technology is therefore rising, which is great. And from our perspective, when we look at a deal or when we look at a business deck, I think we also do something which I think entrepreneurs should be aware of, that we do scrape beyond the words of AI and ML. Okay, we see that very often. So we have to do that because we have to scrape that first layer or two and say, is it a real AI? Is it really ML? So I think both sides, both entrepreneurs and investors are getting educated, quote unquote, to understand this, to understand its applications. And I think that is opening up the market for so much more innovation that's happening.
Right.
So to a great extent, investors also learn. Okay, they don't come with they don't know everything. I think every pitch that I sit in or every pitch session, I've always walked away learning something. And we hope that, maybe something that we've shared may have helped the entrepreneur.
Right.
If not even a connect, some comment that
Some
we may
insight.
have given that they would have helped them.
Sure.
So I think that partnership of coming together is what really forms the foundation of a partnership. It's a marriage at the end of the day. Unfortunately, as Sanjay said, that we have a life to exist. So we do look for a divorce and then a heavy alimony. But the reality is that you're looking for that excellent chemistry of building something which is going to be very valuable.
Right. We just have a few more minutes, so I want to open it up to the audience because I'm sure the entrepreneurs, would-be entrepreneurs, would have a lot of questions for the investors. So can we have a mic?
So, hello.
And if you can tell me, who you want the
Yeah,
question to be.
I mean, anybody can take this. So, from your perspective, what is more, what is more interesting? A technology that has not really specialized into a specific use case, or somebody who has understood the use case and domain perfectly and developed the technology only for that. You mentioned the example of gray-orange, which was into robotics, into this. So their use case was pivoting, right? And they finally found it. Whereas as growing up as a product manager, I've always learned that you sort of really study the use case and market and build for that and get really successful there. So I'm just curious to understand from your perspective, what is more interesting?
Let me try and then you could follow it up. It's a good question because it's a hard choice. So I think a good technology which is defensible, which is built well, is important. But that technology should have surely an applicability, right? Now, you could well say that it could have number of applicabilities, but at an early stage or even at a seed stage, it should at least demonstrate to my mind a good use case in one sector or one application. And if that is a growing market itself, that would be good for us. But if it has multiple use cases, all the better. But we do also realize that at an early stage, the team can only do that much. But whatever you do, do it well is what the hope is.
We go a lot by the team. So in our particular case, if we like the team, we would invest.
Go ahead.
Hi, my question is to Sanjay. I'm Himanshu. I've been an ex-entrepreneur myself. So my question is, there are a lot of companies which start as a product company, but ultimately because of lack of funds or because of lack of traction, they move to the service model. Now, once they move to the service model, that is when they start realizing.
And products is that they're massively scalable once, and they have those network effects, right? Once they get there. So there could be creative ways to structure it. I mean, we've seen a lot of companies that sometimes have a services arm, and they typically subsidize the product when they start. But at some point, I think one has to decide, right, what you're going to be, services or products. I mean, look at our. Well, look at it. I mean, this is the NPC, and it's not necessarily every company has to be VC funded. But if you look at our best services companies from Wipro and Infosys, they started as services, and now they're adding platform and products versus the other way around. So there's no good or bad. But the fact is that if you look at like a WeChat, for example, or it's a platform, right? More on the consumer side. The network effects usually come from those platforms. So at some point, one has to really think on how do you get that scale, which is that, like for Grey Orange, again, I think they found that it's for warehousing automation. If you look at Nest, for example, in Google, yes, it could have been much bigger, right? I mean, it could have become a $10 billion company, I don't know, but they at least, they found a product and then scaled. So, yeah, I don't know if you all want to add anything.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is in the early stage, be it from service to product, that journey, it's a cultural change. How you think, how you build a team, how you, the entire model, entire environment changes. And I think that is something which entrepreneurs who are sort of migrating from service to product should keep in mind, because that's a very hard one. It's a mindset change is what I'm talking about.
Okay. Can we have mic here? Last question.
May I know what your take is with respect to regional language content, products, and services? Is that a focus area going forward, or it's not that important?
Yeah, we love them. We love them because most of India, if you're talking about India, most of India is non-English. So it's absolutely an obvious market. Previously, some of them could not be reached. So the internet started off in English. But I think everything to do with the internet, products, education, finance, it's all going to sort of move to the vernacular, to the majority domain. It's just like all the TV channels sort of switched to that and the radio switched to that, unfortunately. But but it did. But that's reality, right? So that to me is the big 98% market, and
Are you
that's where it's
seeing
all
a lot of
happening.
startups in local languages?
Tremendous. The hardest thing in Q2 2018 is that.
Yeah, I'd say that I think thanks to the British, we've got different states, and that's a huge opportunity. Not only is it happening, the Chinese are very interested. You see them coming in. They've got a massive market, but just one language, or just different dialects, but not different languages. And the fact is that this is a very underserved market. If you think about it, right? All of them have phones. They have smartphones, and they're waiting to be targeted and served. So it's a huge opportunity.
I think one last question. I think there's hands raised already.
I myself from a startup. So the biggest challenge we face is most of these deep technologies do require a lot of investment when we want to create something of a very innovative value. But without investment, getting the first customer or reaching to the customer is always the biggest challenge. So as investors, do you think that until we reach the customers, we cannot go for bigger investments?
Yeah, raising money is always difficult, whether deep tech or otherwise. But no, there are investors who do invest in what you call pre-revenue, right? Before you get customers, those are pre-revenue startups. Absolutely, angels invest. Many funds like ours also, we've invested in pre-revenue companies. So those do exist. You have to look for them. In fact, at IN specifically between the angel network and now the fund, we are investing, entrepreneurs can raise from 50 lakhs to 50 crores on a single platform. So you just need to keep looking for those investors. But there are investors, and there are many of them who invest in pre-revenue companies.
I just add to that quickly. You'd be surprised. I think if it's a real compelling pain point, you'd be surprised that some customers might actually be willing to give an advance or fund that. I'll tell you, when we were evaluating some of these deep tech companies and the customer DD, we did a bit. They said, yeah, I mean, the last question, last request was, please fund this company because we really need it, and we're happy to be partners. So. Yeah, I mean, you've just got to find those right set of early pilots.
Yeah, to Sanjay's point, I want to give an example. One of our companies, in fact, we were about to invest, and we were doing a customer check, a pilot check reference, and the customer basically said that, why don't you only fund what they need for working capital and their operational expenses? We'll provide the equipment. So, things like that do happen.
Just to quickly add to that, the tip there is that try and find an investor who understands your technology, because he or she will be able to foresee what it can be used for. So very often you'll end up going to a lot of investors who don't understand it, and then you'll think you'll be demoralized, right? So eschew those and go, like in the case of Dhruva, because I could code, I could actually understand the issue that they were solving, right? So it was very easy for me to make the call.
All right. Thanks a lot for that candid conversation from everybody. And Chandra, thank you for that candid moderating of the session. And